Greetings, ladies and metal-gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Dwellers in the Deep, written by Infernalism. The Spiral is a vast place. I know you've heard that before. Darkness, we've all heard about that before. But it's far bigger than you can imagine. Far bigger than you'd care to imagine. Far bigger than you'd want to imagine. Let me explain. The core, as we know it, is home to several thousand species, spread across about 2.5 billion star systems. So many stars, so many species, that for about 3 billion years, it was complete chaos. Thousands of different species coming to age at roughly the same time, able to reach out to each other with minimal effort. I'm talking about species bumping into each other in solid fuel-powered cans. This, of course, led to galaxy-wide conflict for, again, millions of years. And some species simply wanted to exist. So rather than fight, they loaded their people up and headed out of the core for the outer reaches. None of them ever came back. Not one. Not ever. We figured out that there was something out there in the darkness, and it was only safe here in the light of the crowded core. With that in mind, with the reality of a hungry enemy at the edge of the shadows, it became clear that working together was the only real solution. This was, of course, and conveniently, after a few of the larger empires decided to work together. Their united strength of several dozen star systems meant that the smaller powers had to go along or be wiped by their combined militaries. And so, now, we have the core. A beacon of strength and power, and the structure around which the galaxy exists. The spiral runs smoothly now. New species rarely show up these days, but when they do, they are told the way of things and given a planet or two to settle on the outer edges. They don't like it, but it is what it is. The core is full. Try again later. Why does this bother them? Well, okay. You're from where again? Oh, right. The place with the sentient jungles. That's not too far out. That's a dual star system, yeah. What do you guys do when the stars' rotations have them both setting at the same time? Right. Button up in your homes, wait it out, and wait for your suns to come back into the sky again. Out there, out in the outer rim, their stars aren't close to one another. They're often separated by a factor of 10 or more than what we get here. Right. And a lot of them are single star systems. See, now you're getting it. When their star sets, yeah, darkness, I mean real darkness, where the only thing in the sky is a few twinkling distant stars and maybe a local moon to reflect a little light. So these settlers are living in the pitch black of nothingness, and they have to set up a special VR system to replicate a normal lighted existence. It is not hard, but oh man, I've heard about a few worlds where their systems went down and, yeah, no. I'm not messing with you. Just a nightmare to even think about. Hate to even imagine it. Now you've got the Vaughn, and they say that they can handle the dark, but you never see them actually populating those worlds, do you? They're all scavengers and work out there, but they don't live out there, if you get my meaning. Probably all huddled up around light systems in their ships, with the windows closed and piloting by remote. Yeah, to the dark with them. Greedy savages. What? No, seriously speaking, there is no race out there that can handle it. Now, some nuts in the core's university networks talk about how a spiral arms have life, even sentient life. But if that's the case, then where are they? Why aren't they here? We process a dozen new species every day, and not one of them has come in from the outer reaches. Not one. It is simple enough. Sentient life can't tolerate the darkness out there. It drives them insane if you evolve at all in the first place. I mean, how could they exist in the first place? Planets rotate, well, mostly, and that means periods of real darkness with no reprieve or respite, every single day. Okay, sure, at the poles of those planets there'd be huge swaths of time where it'd be bright all the time, but then there'd be huge chunks of time of pure darkness. Try to wrap your head around that dark humor. Living in the dark all the time. Ugh. Well, There was this one time when this one species of evolved bipeds showed up in a nuclear-powered tube that they claimed to be from the spiral arms. My boss told me about them. It was his boss that processed their entry into the core, and when they were told the 2-planet maximum for new members, and that they'd have to get in line and wait for a few centuries before they would be allowed to start uplifting themselves with the standard core-developed technologies, they supposedly turned around and headed back the way they came. I don't know. He never told me. Out there somewhere, probably clinging to some outer reach rock. Too stubborn or stupid to get with the program. Anyways, let's get some lunch. Alex would have liked to correct the Professor Chief, but that would have ruined the whole point of bugging the crawler's office. And not just his office, but his system as well. And seeing the look on the alien's face upon being corrected wouldn't have been worth the effort of cleaning up the mess of sorting things out again. Still, it amused him. The core was crowded with all these species, all living together, and it was great and all, a real testament to their ability to coexist. But holy shit, it was crowded. And bright, not that it bothered him all that much, but with all the light, well, those thousands and thousands of species had evolved to deal with it, and humanity, plainly, had not, which, incidentally, was a core's saving grace. Currently, there are several million humans living in the core, mostly on lesser roles as cleaners and laborers in low-gravity worlds where their larger size and strength came in handy. Not because they liked it, but because being able to spy on the core species meant being mostly invisible. With a bit of work, it had been possible to create several new species that were, in fact, just covers for humanity, to infiltrate and keep an eye on the core. All of them hidden behind incredibly durable and unremarkable encounter suits that enhanced strength and came with advanced sensory systems that made them all very useful for listening and recording and forwarding on-choice bits. In the several centuries since humanity showed up at the crowded and overly bright core and decided to go make a place for themselves elsewhere, the invented species that humanity had put together had passed along all the relevant core technologies that they could get their hands on, and from there, they'd experimented, studied, took things apart and put them back together in entirely unintended ways, and were probably about a century ahead of the core's best tech levels. Those early empires that had set up the power structure with their own worlds at the top of the food chain. All while slowly and methodically filling up our little corner of the galaxy, the Orion Arm. Right now, about 700 worlds held human colonies. In another century, they tell us, we'll have 1,700, and 17,000 in a century after that. Exponential growth. It seems a little ridiculous, but he wasn't one of the scientists in charge. He rolled his cart further down the hallway to find other offices that needed tending to. Some occupied, most not. The encounter suit filtered out most of the light, and he tried not to think about self-destruct, designed to look like explosive decompression should the suit be breached. It had not happened in a long while. A few years, yeah. Along the way, several other tidbits were recorded. Things about new species with interesting, unique technologies, special abilities, unique aspects. Honestly, just another day in the core. Humanity spent about 2,000 years out there in the dark, outside the core. In that time, they found other species that were equally stubborn and stupid enough not to like the core. Those species then left a structure and dull paradise to try and find their own way in hell of darkness. Some few were like humanity, those who had somehow grown to sentience in the dark, but most needed special environmental systems to survive and stay sane. The species had grown to cover approximately 37% of the outer reaches of the Milky Way, and their best systems indicated that it would take another 3,000 years to cover 75%, and that was deemed much too long to wait, even for a species that had grown into technological immortality long ago. The core had died fastly, slowly, grown in technological prowess as well, using ancient procedures to encourage endless rounds of testing, examination, and then further testing. When humanity came out of the darkness with their starships that stretched the length of a star system, the core was completely outmatched. It was akin to fighting gods with thrown rocks and sharp sticks. They made no effort to occupy or colonize. They had 30% of the outer reaches of the galaxy for themselves still, but a new power structure was established. 1. All new technologies, abilities, and species were to be submitted to humanity for examination and, potentially, to be given over without exception. 2. A tithe of materials was to be submitted by all worlds able to do so, comprised of raw materials in various degrees. 3. No race or species would be allowed to leave the core for the outer reaches without the express permission of humanity. With these 3 new rules in place, the core settled back into a new and yet old rhythm. Oh, to be sure, there were quite a few peoples who asked or demanded or fought to find out why humanity had done what it had done, but no answers were ever given. The core species came to resent the vast power of humanity, but they were never willing to do enough to cast off their chains due to simple complacency. The humans asked little and were too strong to resist, after all. So they sat on their worlds and did as they were told, and quietly resented the new power structure much as they did the old. They never gave a second thought to the new reality where technology was now being given to the core instead of the other way around. No one of consequence considered why they needed so much material. And it was only a tiny handful of selected new species that were accepted by humanity who ever learned why. Because humanity had learned the truth, that the core worlds had been right to fear the darkness. Humanity had found something else out there in the dark, something that thrived there in the darkness, between the stars, on the dead worlds with no stars at all. Something far more vicious and mindless and voracious than humanity could ever be. And humanity had decided that, all too quickly and all too easily, that they were the only ones who could fight this thing that lived out there. This ancient, unthinking horror that hungered for the fat, juicy bounty that lay in the core worlds, full of mostly defenseless worlds. This ancient thing grew in the darkness and had overwhelmed about 1/3 of the outer ridge worlds and, if not stopped, would encircle the whole spiral galaxy and then drive in and consume it all, every last person on every last world. Humanity had 1/3 of the outer reach worlds as well, and now the bounty of the core and was that they had a fighting chance to stop this unnamed and unnameable horror that did little more than consume. Perhaps in a few thousand years they'd reveal the truth to the core worlds, perhaps not. In the meantime, humanity went to war in the darkness against monsters to protect countless worlds who saw them as conquerors at best, or monsters at worst. Because when you strip it all down to basics, it takes monsters to defeat monsters. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters: Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Draxoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.